The Gwart Show is sponsored by Ellipsis Labs. Ellipsis Labs is building a world where mainstream finance happens on-chain. Their first product, Phoenix, is a fully on-chain limit order book DEX on Solana doing hundreds of millions of dollars in volume. I know this team personally. It's one of the strongest in the space. If you're interested in working with a team that's here to stay, Ellipsis Labs is hiring engineers passionate about DeFi to join their team. You can find Ellipsis Labs on Twitter at ellipsis_labs or head to ellipsislabs.xyz to learn more and apply. Hello. Today we are here with none other than James Prestwich, longtime contributor in a bunch of different parts of the crypto ecosystem and well known for giving spicy takes and being somebody who actually writes code too. So that's quite valuable. James, welcome. Do you want to give a little bit of background?
Sure. I've been in crypto full time for going on 11 years now. So back then it was a completely different industry. You know, Ethereum didn't exist. We had, like Bitcoin and Litecoin and Ravencoin, and they airdropped Aurora coin to everyone in Iceland. And it was, kind of a weird and unpleasant Bitcoin clone time. So since Ethereum launched, I transitioned into not just writing Bitcoin code, but adding in Ethereum and EVM stuff. And that's where I've spent most of my time for the last few years. Around 2017, I started working on cross-chain communication and bridges full time. Kept doing that up until 2022. Trying to remember what year it is. And since then, I've been focused on Ethereum Rust ecosystem contributions. So until recently, I was one of the core maintainers of the Alloy project, which sits under Reth and Foundry and everything else. So at this point, I've been around so long, contributed to everything. Like odds are, everyone's using code I wrote, just doesn't realize it. And that's pretty much exactly where I like to be. I want to make a lot of contributions. I want to make things easy. I want to make it smooth and straightforward to write good code. I don't feel the need to have a lot of recognition for that.
Nice. Okay, I'm about to give you a very, very broad question. I'm going to let you run with it. From when you got into Ethereum, basically at inception to now, what are the most dramatic changes in the culture and the identity? Just start giving us some rambling thoughts as to the evolution of Ethereum from, the beginning until now, and then maybe you see where this is going in the future.
Yeah. One of the things I think is super interesting about Ethereum, and most people most people weren't there, right? So it's understandable that they wouldn't know this, is Ethereum started off 75 to 80% a scam. There's a bunch of founders, a bunch of them just wanted to take the money, produce barely anything, and kind of split the money and chill. There was a conflict and a specific event where those people got booted out and the other people stayed in and actually built something. So the fact that Ethereum exists at all is somewhat surprising. And it's mostly thanks to Gavin, Utah, Vitalik, Joe, that it exists, that it wasn't a scam in the first place. A lot of Bitcoiner sentiment about Ethereum for the last however many years has been anchored in that origination as a scam. Vitalik was kind of recruited for Ethereum because he had previously been recruited for other scams and done a good job of being visible and shilling them. And Vitalik is an extremely smart guy who is maybe a little over-trusting. So Ethereum from the beginning was not supposed to exist necessarily, right? So the fact that it did it all was surprising. The fact that it got so much momentum so early on was thanks to the EVM and thanks to Ethereum doing things that no other chain could at the time. Allowing developers to write their own logic into the chain. And the biggest change for Ethereum was ERC20. Once there was a token standard, once people could issue assets on it effectively, and once the tooling around that got good, you saw the giant, speculative token boom of 2017, 2018. And everything that comes after that has just been recreating that speculative token boom in some new surprising way. So like the DeFi yield farming summer a few years back, it's all the same speculative token boom, but in a new game. And so Ethereum has had this bizarre trajectory of starting as a scam, moving into proper like decentralization maxis, and then slowly sliding back down into mostly being focused on, money again. As the community grew, most of the people coming in are focused on the money and focused on the speculation. They're not focused on decentralization. So the core developer ecosystem and the core EF people are extremely focused on decentralization, generally speaking, while the marginal application builder is in it for the money. And so Ethereum has this real like split brain community coming out of the last, 8-9 years of just social evolution.
When you got into Ethereum, how did you feel ETH, the asset, should be thought of? Like, did you think of this as money? Did you think of this as a way to pay for compute? There's a lot of different like narratives that have, kind of sprung up, and, now we're obviously at the ultrasound money. We may be shifting away from that, but how did you think of ETH, the asset, when you sort of got in?
Back then, everyone making decisions about coins, like, and having these like debates on what the coin's for, was focused on the SEC and focused on FinCEN. So a lot of the debates were less about what the coin was for and more about, is this a security? Is this, money transmission? And then, Bitcoiners are attacking Ethereum for not having a predictable supply and for having the pre-mine and for being bad money, because Bitcoins have deeply anchored their identity at that point in being digital cash. And Ethereum is attacking Bitcoin for being kind of useless and just like, a dumb rock. Because Ethereum, anchored their identity in the EVM and smart contracts and in programmable chain state. And for me, like, I'm just like trying to do interesting things. I'm just trying to write code, make things work. And what I care about most is not the money aspect or the programmability aspect. It's that anyone can run a client and participate in the system in some way. You can just check that the code, the network, the blockchain you're relying on is working properly. And anyone with a reasonable computer anywhere in the world can do that. So I don't really look at the asset in terms of store of value or medium of exchange or utility token or any of these things. I don't really think about the assets that much at all. I don't have a long-term thesis for ETH. As things stand, it is an interesting place to do things. Anyone can run a node and verify the chain. And that's kind of what I have cared about and still care about.
Yeah, you mentioned the kind of schism between the Ethereum developers, EF, who are focused a lot on the decentralization aspect, and then the people who want to build stuff atop now, who are focused very much on the speculation and maybe to some extent the users, I suppose, the moneyness aspect. You want to just ramble more about this? Like, what do you view as the current state? And like, is there a way to reconcile this? Is it going as planned? What are your thoughts there?
I don't know that there's necessarily a way to reconcile this. I mean, we can kind of observe what's going on right now, right? Like, the money doesn't go to client development. It doesn't go to protocol development. Nobody is like putting a bunch of money behind inclusion lists, right? So everything being done there is being done by ideological people.
Yeah.
And the progress is maybe a little slower than anyone would like. We can observe that the money goes to specific places and why it goes there. And that, there's a class of people building these big DeFi applications, or these big restaking applications, or LSTs, or whatever you want. And the money has aggregated to those people. And proof of stake and the transition from proof of work via the merge have made this state worse. Like, proof of stake inherently aggregates capital. Proof of work requires miners to sell their assets in order to keep mining, whereas proof of stake, your assets just sit there and earn interest. There is no necessity to put assets back in circulation. So as a result, proof of stake is aggregative. So as money aggregates to app builders, and proof of stake aggregates continues aggregating capital where capital already is, you see a growing imbalance. Like things are getting worse, not better.
Let me just ask you quickly. Do you think that Ethereum moving to proof of stake was a mistake, or do you think that it's still something that can work? It's just different than proof of work as you described.
Well, whether it's a mistake
work, for one, it functionally does work. Now, whether or not it leads to the outcomes, I guess maybe is a better way to phrase this.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Is whether it's a mistake depends on what you want out of it.
Yeah.
We can observe proof of stake aggregating capital in every proof of stake chain. Like if you go out to Cosmos and you poke around, it's the same big, validation companies with the same delegated stake from the same people who bought into the tokens in the seed round or whatever. Being an insider in Cosmos or in Ethereum has been an extremely lucrative thing because you get to buy tokens at a serious discount well before the public gets access to them. So one more way that, one more route for capital to accumulate in the same places for the same people. Whether or not you think that's a mistake depends on what you want out of it. Were the protocol designers of Ethereum trying to prevent capital from aggregating? Right? I don't think they were. So probably this isn't a mistake for them. This seems to have been an acceptable outcome. So it's probably fine. For me, it's not my preferred outcome. But again, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the assets. I spend time thinking about the tech and whether anyone can participate in the system. If you want to opt into the system, you should be informed about what the system does. You should know that it tends to, aggregate capital, that it tends to move money in specific ways. But you should still be able to opt into that if you want to.
Yeah. How do you feel about the level of the tech? What gets you excited still working on EVM, Ethereum as a whole?
I like working on things that are kind of underexplored, underindexed. So, for example, right now, we work on code for Rollups, and we work on designs for Rollups, and we write research notes on Rollups. You can go look up our Substack. My company is called Init4, INIT4. So we're writing about underexplored aspects of rollup design. So alternate sequencing models. Right now, basically all rollups have the same sequencing model, except for I think there's one that's actually a sort of based rollup. There are way more than 2 sequencing models in the world. Everybody is using one of them, and nobody has even thought about all of the other possible designs. So that's the kind of thing that gets me excited, is saying, here's something that is extremely important and valuable, rollup sequencing, and only one design has actually taken off. It seems unlikely that that is the best design. Nobody's even talking about other designs. There aren't any research papers on it. There aren't any specs for it. This seems like a great place to spend a lot of time and, dig deep into the tech and see what can be done if you approach it with fresh eyes.
Yeah. So going off that, what can be done, right? We have basically centralized sequencers right now, which are servers run by usually the team or foundation or whatever. And then we have, I think like Taiko, I don't know how to say it. Taiko is
Taiko.
the one, based rollup currently. So like, what are the other versions of sequencing, or like where has this led you maybe right now with your research?
With the centralized sequencer, it feels straightforward, but it actually creates a bunch of technical issues that need to be resolved. It creates a bunch of complexity. We refer to this as run-ahead sequencing because the sequencer is producing blocks faster than they go into the data availability layer. So the sequencer is running ahead. It's giving pre-confirmations for everything rather than actually confirming things. And so that means that the nodes need to be able to follow the sequencer ahead of everything, and that the nodes need to be able to roll back in case the sequencer commits to a DA block that never actually finalizes. It creates a huge amount of just technical complexity. So in fact, Optimism nodes are 4 nodes, 4 pieces of software. You have to run the Ethereum CL, the Ethereum EL, the Optimism CL, and the Optimism EL. And that's just a mess. And so run-ahead sequencing, you get these instant, with air quotes, transactions because the sequencer is pre-confirming you. But you don't actually know whether the sequencer has equivocated or not until quite a bit later. And you have to be able to handle that case. And the sequencing model has to be able to handle reorgs of the data availability layer, which happen in Ethereum, but not in Tendermint-based things. And so there's a huge amount of complexity just handling the run-ahead model. And then in the base model, you're opting into the most toxic part of Ethereum. The proposer-builder auction in Ethereum is probably the worst thing going on right now for Ethereum. You're aggregating block production into 2 block producers who are essentially unaccountable, have control over what goes into Ethereum and what doesn't, and are forced to extract as much value as they can because they have to bid against each other to pay rent to the proposer. The proposer does nothing and gets all of the money, which is what we call an economic inefficiency. It's money they get paid just for owning something, not because they're actually doing anything valuable. At this point, like, the block reward for proposing a block is just airdropping random money onto validators for no reason. And really, that's an inefficient market. It's driving competition out. So we're down to just 2 real block producers. And it's an extremely unhealthy thing for the ecosystem. And so a base rollup, like opting into that market, opting to give all sequencing revenue to the proposer who's doing nothing and doesn't give a shit about you, like, that's just not good for the rollup, right? So we have these 2 sequencing models, neither of which are really very good. And nobody is like critically examining them. All of these, like OpStack rollups launching on whatever rollup as a service provider.
Yeah.
They don't care what the sequencing model is because they're not actually looking to provide a good user experience or to build a healthy ecosystem. They're rushing to get their token launched, and they're doing it as a rollup because that's what's trendy these days. The same reason everyone in 2020 did, yield farms, and the same reason everyone in 2017 did token sales. It's just what's trendy these days. When you step back, when you critically examine things, you might want to do something like a based rollup, but with a permissioned builder set. Basically cut out the auction. If builders aren't bidding against each other, then they have no reason to drive up the block bid. They get better margins, but also they have less need to extract. There is no outside pressure forcing them to take advantage of users. You would expect to see more MEV coming from SexDex ARB rather than from sandwiching. That's obviously a complicated take that people can come at me for on Twitter, but basically having 5 builders and going round robin and having a centralized permissioning server controlling that is significantly better and significantly more decentralized than Ethereum's block building is today, and significantly more decentralized than any other Rollups block building. Just having 5 people and going round robin is better than anything out there. And if something so simple and so stupid is better than the status quo, like, clearly we're doing something wrong.
Thanks for listening to The Gwart Show on the Blockspace Podcast Network. Subscribe to our newsletter at blockspace.media to get the show directly to your inbox. Show links, transcripts, and Bitcoin articles twice per week. Stay ahead of the conversation by visiting blockspace.media.
Interesting. Okay, I want to come back to Rollups in a bit, but let me just ask you then, you think that the L1's PBS auction is mal-designed. And then you just said that a 5 builder round robin would be preferable. I assume you mean for something like the L1 as well. What are like solutions to the current like PBS design in your opinion, or what interests you? Yeah, I know. It's like a really loaded question. Of course, I've had like 20 people on here all give different answers, right? But at the same time, I'm curious to hear like what went wrong, and then how is this rectified?
So this is a bit of a funny question for me. Like, as far as I know, I was the first person in Ethereum to write about MEV. This was like 2017, maybe early 2018. We didn't have the term MEV then. I've looked for other people writing about it, but I haven't found anything. In like back then, we understood that miners would extract value. We knew about this. We knew how it would work. We knew how, like sandwich attacks worked and DEX arbitrage worked. We knew what behavior would harm users. The thing we didn't predict very well was the market that would form around it. So the like relay system and the searcher, builder, proposer, like separation. It's always like extremely difficult to predict how a market will naturally form. And back then, we collectively, all the protocol designers, whatever, did not spend enough time on this problem. We didn't address it before it started. If we had provided a mechanism for MEV extraction in protocol, we could have prevented the formation of this specific toxic market. Now, maybe we would have replaced it with a different toxic market that would be shitty in a different way, but the fact that we didn't take action ahead of time probably means that it's too late to take action now. There is such a lot of money around for this. Some of the EF researchers I've talked to love it because it means you're just handing out money to stakers, and we love giving money to home stakers. In terms of fixing it, like, it's hard for me to give a politically viable answer. It's hard to say how you change Ethereum in a way that people will agree to. So you have attempts to provide, an economically viable solution to essentially transition from this market to a new market by changing the market structure and incentives. That's things like Suave, for example. And you have some protocol level solutions like EPBS that are trying to address it by changing what is legal in the protocol and moving some of the existing market from out protocol to in protocol. But, it's hard to say which of these works, which will be implemented, and which people will actually decide to use.
Yeah. Okay, coming back to Rollups now, how do you feel about the Rollup-centric roadmap thus far? You're working on tooling and dev kits for for Rollups. So obviously you're in the weeds. How do you feel about just your overarching view right now as to how it's going?
So I'm going to connect this right back to MEV and say, like,
perfect.
One of the core problems with MEV was that we knew about it. We knew it would be significant. We knew it would be important to protocol design, and we didn't address it ahead of time. We're trying to fix it up after the fact, right? And this is a pattern that has repeated through Ethereum's history a number of times. Another huge example is stake delegation. By the time we were designing ETH2, Cosmos already had delegated stake. There was already Steem, STEEM. There was already BitShares. There was already a long history of stake delegation and staking derivatives in practice that we could actually go look at and see working, right? So by avoiding putting delegation in the protocol, we ensured that the market would provide a delegation solution and that we would have no control over what it was. And so I don't know if you remember a year or two back when people were getting so upset about Lido having such a significant percentage of the ETH. I mean, like, we called that long before the merge.
Yeah, Georgios and Hasu wrote a paper about it. This is one thing that I bring up often, right? Like, I think in 2020 or 2021, Georgios, Hasu got together and wrote out a pretty, direct research paper that said this is what is going to happen, right? So I mean, even the people who I think are perceived to have power, soft power, whatever you want to call it, they were putting this out there in the open and saying this is what is going to happen. So yes, I agree with you. Sorry, go on though.
Yeah. So this is a pattern that has repeated a number of times throughout Ethereum's history. There is a visible, significant problem that we choose not to address.
Yeah.
And the Rollup-centric roadmap is just one of the realizations of that issue, of that bad trend. There was a visible, serious problem of scaling that we attempted to address in-house via all of the sharding designs and all of the talk of 1024 shards or hyper-quadratic sharding, or then there were only going to be 64 shards, and then there weren't going to be any shards at all. And we tried to make in-house solutions. We didn't pick any in-house solution, and instead we stopped trying to solve that problem. And we let the market solve it for us. And it's probably a coincidence that the market is people who had close relationships with the EF at the time, probably unrelated. But again, we are getting to a position where we don't like the consequences of the Rollup-centric roadmap, where there's asset fragmentation, where Rollup users are getting locked into proprietary ecosystems, where there's completely unnecessary tokens slapped on top of things because people got to make money. Like stake delegation, like MEV, there was a problem that we chose not to take control over, that we opted out of solving. And we're getting into a position where we don't like the consequences.
So how do you feel personally? You kind of talk about we collectively, and I tend to agree that this is the sentiment. I'm curious what you think. I mean, what do you think of the Rollup centric roadmap right now? Like, where do you think it's doing well, and where do you think that there's obvious problems, like in your opinion? And as somebody who works on this daily, right? Like, I think that is important. Oftentimes we hear this from people pontificating, like myself on Twitter, shit posting or pointing out stuff and never writing a line of code. You actually are in the weeds, right? Like, where do you see, the good and the bad?
Well,
what do you think about base? There we go.
That's a good one. I think that base is extremely economically successful. and is doing a good job of locking its users in and making them reliant on Coinbase infrastructure via things like 4337, Paymasters, etc., and of providing, wallet experiences that can't be replicated on other chains.
Yes.
Whether that is scaling Ethereum or not, I couldn't tell you. I tend to lean towards rollups are their own chains with their own people running them, making their own decisions, and that the relationship with Ethereum is pretty tenuous. Other people obviously strongly disagree with my opinions here. When it comes to Base, this is very economically successful. There's a lot of transactions going on there. There's a lot of sequencer revenue, and I assume Optimism and Coinbase are pretty happy about it. The amount of that revenue flowing back to Ethereum or Ethereum validators or the Ethereum asset price, I think it's actually very little.
It is objectively very little. You can see it's very little.
but Gwart, they're using ETH as the gas token.
Well, as you just mentioned, that could soon be a thing of the past, but we'll see, I suppose. Do you think that's an interesting take, and I think that it's been, said on Twitter and in the public. Go ahead.
We can boil down this whole thing. It's when you give away control of your roadmap to other people, you no longer get a say in what happens. And the rollup centric roadmap is Ethereum no longer getting a say in how it scales or whether it scales at all. They're giving away complete control over the users, the future of the chain, et cetera, to people who are definitely not Ethereum aligned.
Do you have a prediction for how this plays out? I know, it's hilarious. Do you have a prediction for how this plays out? I mean, what is your 5-10 year horizon here?
I don't have a strong prediction. I think that a lot of Ethereum's, and I think a lot of crypto assets' fates are strongly determined by macro rather than what happens in the industry.
Yeah.
I mean, prices go up and down based on interest rates more than they go up and down based on which rollup is cooler.
For sure.
It's just the way the world works. So I think making a prediction without knowing what the geopolitical climate or whatever is going to be in the next 5 years is a little silly because it's going to change drastically. Completely different world now than it was 5 years ago. So what I would think about isn't a solid prediction. It's where are the cost centers for these rollups? Where are the profit centers for these rollups? And what actions will they take that reduce costs and increase profits over the long run? If it turns out that Ethereum blobs, get used and the price goes up, they become a cost center and people start looking at how to cut costs. Is Ethereum blob space that much more valuable for Base than a DA committee or a Celestia or some other DA source? I don't know. Right now, none of these centrally sequenced rollups, none of the run-ahead sequencers really use the benefits of Ethereum DA. Right now, it is primarily a political decision to use Ethereum DA. It's an alignment decision. It's so that they can continue arguing that they are Ethereum when they're clearly not. But in the future, if it becomes expensive to use that, people will probably stop using it. In the future, if you can be more profitable by taking fees in USDC rather than ETH, rollups will probably do that.
Interested in Bitcoin scaling, startups, or learning more about Bitcoin softworks? Join us Saturday, November 9th at the Fidelity Center in Boston, Massachusetts for Op Next, a one-day conference on scaling Bitcoin hosted by Blockspace Media, the producers of this podcast. Join Bitcoiners like Peter Todd, Portland Hodl, and more to discuss various Bitcoin proposals like OpCat, the Great Script Restoration, CTV, and more. Attend workshops, speaker sessions, and panels discussing the latest in scaling tech, from ZK to ARC to Bitcoin soft fork history. And for a limited time, use code OCTOBER to get 25% off a general admission ticket. Find out more by visiting opnext.dev. Again, that's October at opnext.dev. You can find out more by checking out the show notes below.
Having been here since basically the beginning, I sense in your voice kind of like, and I've had discussions with you before, and I've always kind of sensed a little bit of like, I don't know if the word's nostalgia, but you kind of like reminisce, and see how this whole experiment has played out. How do you feel in terms of staying motivated to continue working on these things, right? Like, I don't fault, especially developers in the weeds writing code. Like, I don't fault people for, just wanting to build stuff, but I do wonder, you have ideological leanings, I could tell, obviously, and you've been here since the beginning. Do you ever, like, what would be maybe something that you'd be like, all right, I'm giving up, I'm going to work on something else? Or what keeps you motivated? Like, do you feel that the level of decentralization for, on the path that we're going is sufficient to keep you motivated?
Okay, so I'm going to go back and refer to something I said earlier, which is that the thing that has always been important to me is that people can participate in some way, that they can verify that it's working, even if they can't necessarily have $75,000 to run a validator with. So I have two stories that are in some sense the same story, but are actually quite different. The first one is, I have spoken to a lot of people in South America and in other places. And, a lot of them use Tether on Tron.
Yeah.
And they use Tether on Tron because the local currency's exchange rate is in free fall, or because it's more convenient, or because it is, sometimes illegal for them to buy dollars at anything other than the government rate. Right. So a lot of the local economy uses Tether on Tron, paying their gardener or their babysitter.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's pretty cool. I can go and run the Tron chain hypothetically and see that it's working. And that is objectively better than a bank.
Yep.
So just that level of verifiability, even if those people don't run nodes, don't verify anything, they are getting something that is, in some sense, significantly better than their alternatives. The other version of the story is back in 2019, Scaling Bitcoin was in Tel Aviv, and Starkware hosted a conference around the same time called Starkware Sessions, which was really good. So I went out for Scaling and for Starkware Sessions and spent some time in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and a couple of my Jewish crypto friends organized a group trip out to Jerusalem. And so we got to do a bunch of the Torah stuff, and we also went to the market in Jerusalem and met a friend of a friend who is Palestinian living in Jerusalem. And his day job was to drive to Tel Aviv, buy Bitcoin and carry it with cash. Drive to Tel Aviv, buy Bitcoin with cash, and carry it back to Jerusalem. Because the community he was a part of were not real citizens. They weren't allowed to have full banking services. They had no real alternatives for storing wealth that couldn't be taken by the government. And so that left a lasting impact on me of, okay, so maybe we're spending an awful lot of time on stupid things like home stakers or yield farming or whatever. But there are communities out there in the world who benefit from our work in meaningful ways, even though they are far removed from what we think about on a day-to-day basis. So for me, it always has been pretty values driven. And unfortunately, there are relatively few specific instances in which I've been able to go out into the world and see that we are having impact. But those experiences are very important to me.
How do you feel? Sorry, that was like quite inspirational. And now I'm going to pivot back to kind of a more not technical, but just
sorry, it's off tone for the podcast, right?
No, it's good. And I mean, I'm in agreement with what you said, to be clear, but you brought up a point again when you said home stakers. I wanted to ask, how do you feel then about the current kind of proposals regarding Ethereum scaling? Do you have any reservations about increasing block times or multiple concurrent proposers? Like, I don't know how in the weeds you are with this stuff, but what do you think right now, like in terms of the L1, what interests you, and like, what do you think is a good idea? What do you think is a bad idea?
A lot of these are put forward by specific people who have specific goals, right?
Yeah.
So multiple concurrent proposers, a great example. Like a specific person has been pushing it. My main problem with evaluating them from a non-technical perspective, from evaluating like what's good, is I don't think Ethereum has a consistent view of its own goals, of its purpose. Everybody has a different idea of what makes Ethereum good. And that set of ideas has changed so much over the years, and has grown less cohesive over time. The question, like, what should Ethereum do, implies that you have some sort of goal for Ethereum, right? And in the absence of a clear, somewhat unified set of goals, we can't really evaluate any specific proposal. Because we don't know what Ethereum is supposed to do, we don't know how to achieve it. We don't know what to do. We can't say whether we should have multiple concurrent proposers, or whether we should, prioritize ILs or EPBS or PEP-C or home staking or whatever. And so the debate gets caught up in a lot of going back and forth about technical ideas when it's really a values debate. We're not really debating MCP, we're debating what should Ethereum be in the long run. And that's something that we've always been pretty bad at agreeing on, determining, and it's just gotten worse and worse over the years.
Yeah, and this is, sorry to cut you off, but like, this is precisely what, a lot of the Solana people say, whether or not you agree with their North Star. They have a stated North Star, NASDAQ on chain, whatever it is, go really fast, scale hardware. Why do you think that you can recognize this as somebody who's been in the community for a really long time now? Why do you think that you're able to recognize this, but it doesn't seem as like there's cognitive dissonance with even the fact that there's no cohesion, right? Like, a lot of people think that there is a stated, cohesive goal for Ethereum, and you are sitting here as somebody who is there since the beginning. You're saying, look, I'm telling you, nobody knows what this is for, and nobody can articulate what it's for, right? And it's like, it is a bit confusing. And, you compare this with like Solana, and you see why at the very least, like, they have a one-liner that they say, right? It's quite easy.
Yeah, Solana has the advantage of, having a very small number of individuals who set the goals and roadmap and, a marketing director and all that kind of thing. Ethereum has opted out of exercising, centralized control in most cases, or of like directly exercising it. Whereas Solana, like, people have control. They build things. They set roadmaps. It's Solana is more culturally centralized. Like, people look to the company or the foundation more for direction on what Solana ought to be. Whereas people generally form their own. Well, that's not even true. people don't generally form their own opinions. In Ethereum, there is a much wider range of opinion options out there for you to choose from. If you're not technical and you're not, a money theorist person, I don't even know what the right term would be. Like, you're just going to go out there and you're going to look around for opinions, and you're going to stumble on bank lists who are, technically useless, don't really know all that much about Ethereum, but are consistent and on message about how great it is. And you're going to inherit your opinion security from bank lists. And you're going to end up in some very weird places as a result. Right? So Ethereum, for better or worse, has attempted to decentralize the community, to have the EF has mostly opted out of organizational opinions on technical issues, on what Ethereum should be, et cetera, et cetera. And without that organization at the front with a consistent message, keeping everyone else, moving in the same direction, you're going to have a big discoordinated community. And you're going to not know exactly what Ethereum's goals are at any moment.
What do you think about the Ethereum community is looking to Vitalik for a lot of the roadmap and spiritual guidance as well?
Vitalik is very smart, has a ton of ideas, works through his ideas and critically examines them. And, as I kind of said earlier, what's the diplomatic way to, like, Vitalik is not the person you should listen to about spiritual or social matters. And, does not seem to understand the level of power and accompanying responsibility that he has. So, when you see things like Vitalik selling shitcoins, right, that inadvertently or indirectly legitimizes that coin. So, like, when Vitalik donated his SHIB to COVID relief way back in the day, it turned SHIB from a flash in the pan shitcoin to a permanent feature of the community. Vitalik was responsible for SHIB's Coinbase listing and for getting Wintermute to market make it. And that ETH that he donated to COVID relief as a result has just sat in a wallet somewhere. It hasn't even been spent. One of the Polygon founders has it. Right? You can go look this up on chain if you don't believe me, right? So there is this level of deference and community authority and spiritual leadership that Vitalik has, but doesn't behave as if he has or understands. Having SHIB be a permanent fixture of the community is probably a net negative for thousands and thousands of people for a very long time. And we wouldn't have that without Vitalik taking specific actions that were predictably bad, right? So I spend a lot of time reading Vitalik's technical work and thinking about it, and sometimes implementing it. And I would not recommend you listen to his ideas about quadratic funding or radical markets, or basically anything that deals with large-scale social systems instead of technical systems.
Well, then, okay, what do you think about his technical ideas or technical designs? It sounds like you have a slightly more favorable view of those, at the very least. And also, maybe let me just add one other additional question there. Is that at all guidance for the roadmap, or is it not concrete enough, in your opinion, around around designing a cohesive message?
So from a technical perspective, like, the work's generally pretty darn good. There have been some like notable flubs, but they never got like built or rolled out. But But I want to connect this back to talking about Ethereum's purpose, right? Is Vitalik has ideas about what Ethereum should do. And he embeds those ideas into his technical designs and into his roadmaps that everybody goes and retweets, and into the merge, purge, surge, verge, urge, dirge, whatever, right? Like Vitalik has ideas about what Ethereum is and what it should do. Otherwise, he wouldn't be making technical designs at all. Right? Like he is ideologically motivated to build Ethereum into something amazing, and to realize some vision where Ethereum is transformative to society. And that I think is extremely admirable on its own. What I don't like is that he won't, generally tell us directly what those ideas are. And his ideas have a frame dragging effect, right? Like Vitalik's ideas that we aren't even directly observing are pulling everything else along with them in specific directions. So, when people are talking about, the roadmap, the merge, the purge, the surge, whatever, those are Vitalik's thoughts about something we should do for reasons that are in his head that we don't fully know. And people treat it as unofficial. This is what we will do. And it becomes, this like cargo cult roadmap of people, talking about the surge without even knowing why those things are valuable. So it's this very strange setup where Ethereum wants to be this decentralized community, but there are still a small number of leaders whose word carries a huge amount of weight, but aren't clearly communicating and refuse to exercise power.
Which gives the opportunity for other entities to exercise power. Who do you think then are the hard and soft power entities within Ethereum? Like where you don't have to give a hierarchy, but you can just kind of name areas or people, projects that have outsized power.
I think we've covered quite a bit of this with the Rollup centric roadmap.
Yeah.
So I'll hold off there for a minute, but generally all you have to do is follow the money and then also follow the prestige, right? So if you're looking for if you're looking for soft power, see who gets the advisorships with the lucrative, token allocations. That is exercising soft power to get the sinecure, and also people trying to benefit from your power. When someone gives you an advisoryship, they do it either because they think you're going to contribute valuable technical or market advice that no one else has, or because they think you have market power, that you can shift the market just by existing, right? And the people who have market power get a lot more money from advisorships than the people with, market knowledge. So always follow the money, follow the ownership trails, follow the advisorship positions. If you look in Cosmos, you can see who has soft power because there's, one person with an advisorship on every project. And the same group of people are on every cap table and if you look at Ethereum, just look for the same thing. Who's got the coveted advisoryship? Who has the token allocations? And, what are they doing with them?
Yeah. Vague, but people can dig in, I'm assuming.
Yeah. One of the things I think is admirable about Vitalik, going back a step, is that when he realized that advisorships were not because they wanted his advice, he stopped taking them.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I have to ask you just, what do you think of Solana? Do you think that Solana has excited rather has pushed Ethereum and sort of, I don't know, lit a fire under their ass? Is that a reasonable take? Or do you think that Solana is not competition and should be disregarded, at least with regards to the development of Ethereum?
If it were me, I would disregard it. Like, if I were in charge of the Ethereum roadmap, well, first I would stop being in charge and, retreat to the hills or something.
Smart.
But, if it were me, culturally or technically, I would mostly disregard it. Either there's a niche for both of us, or like Ethereum is kind of going to have a rough time anyway. I have worked on Solana, like much less than I've worked on Ethereum, but I'm still worked on Solana. It's not bad. It's easy to work with. I like writing Rust. Sorry, brief ramble. If you had told me in 2015 that we would still be writing Solidity in 2024, I would have maybe quit. But anyway, the people who are concerned about Solana are people who think that Ethereum and Solana have overlap in purpose, and that Solana's trade-offs are better for that purpose, right? So if you want to talk about global financial rails, if you think Ethereum should be the global financial rails for settlement or whatever, then you're probably concerned about Solana because they want something similar and they're probably better suited for it. The Solana gotta go fast ethos is probably better suited to being global financial rails than Ethereum's home staking ethos.
So where does that leave Ethereum then in your mind in terms of its purpose? I know this is a roundabout question, but then if you do agree that Solana being hyper fast and scaling as much as possible is likely better suited for financial rails, which I may agree with you there, side note. But if that is the case, then where does that leave Ethereum insofar as what it should be doing?
Well, again, I don't have a strong opinion on what it should be. I like to look at these things, observationally. You asked earlier, what the difference between me and other people here is. And I think it's that I'm not, personally, I don't have much of my identity invested in being an Ethereum developer. I was a Bitcoin developer before that. I got a degree in Japanese literature. Before that, I was just some dumb kid. I don't have a lot of my self-identity invested in Ethereum's success. People who have done something like built a podcast brand around Ethereum, right? They have not just their economic investment, but their personal identity investment in Ethereum. You have this huge class of people where Ethereum's success is necessary for their self-worth, because they have designed the last several years of their life around ultrasound money. Their 0x whatever Twitter name, right? Yeah. The way they interact with other people is centered on Ethereum, or the way they interact with the world, or their sense of control over their lives. Those are the people who are really worried about Solana's success. And I've completely forgotten what the question was at this point.
No, I think that was, so have I, but I think that was a pretty good answer. Okay. Well, I'll ask you one last thing, and you kind of covered this already, but what are you optimistic then about? I mean, are you optimistic about these systems that we're building? Just bottom line, what still keeps you motivated in terms of financial freedom and allowing that, Palestinian to be able to purchase and self-custody Bitcoin? What are the driving factors now for you?
Unfortunately, there are hard limits to how much of that we can solve with software.
Yeah.
Software happens to be something that I enjoy doing and I'm good at. I will keep trying to solve problems with software. or contributing to solutions. In terms of what I'm optimistic about, when I got into this, and for a number of years afterwards, it was completely unclear whether crypto would still exist in 5 years, right? Like back in 2013, 2014, when Bitcoin was 5 years old, we didn't know whether Bitcoin would live to be 15 or even 10. We didn't know whether the government would just come in and shut down the whole industry at some point. I wouldn't say that I'm optimistic. I'd say that this industry and our ability to impact the world has survived for a long time, and we're probably past the critical point there. We're not going to just vanish at this point, which was an outcome we were all worried about for a long time. So that's pretty nice. In terms of keeping building, I really enjoy what I work on. The taking software and making it better, clearer, more usable, more maintainable, not only is really fun, really interesting, and a bunch of fascinating problems, it also has big long-term impact. So with Alloy, we rewrote this from the ground up to make it better in every way, faster, easier to use. And that has impacted tens of thousands of developers and indirectly many more users. Alloy gets thousands and thousands of downloads every day, and is saving people time, effort, headaches, and money every day. And that feels really good. It feels great to take something that I designed and wrote with the help of the Paradigm team, and get it out into the hands of people and be able to see that it is improving their lives and their ability to work. So that keeps me motivated on a day-to-day basis.
That's the positivity we needed. James, thank you so much. This is fantastic. Extra spicy. I think that people will be very interested to hear your ramblings. Good ramblings, but ramblings. So I appreciate you coming on.
Of course.
Yeah.